From abandoned towns smoldering beneath the surface to doll-sized villages frozen in time, these creepy locations are captured in chilling satellite silence. Whether it's a fiery crater in the desert or a motel full of clowns, each one whispers a strange story. So dim the lights, pull up the covers, and drift off as we explore the creepiest places on Google Maps. Hidden deep within the ancient canals of Xochimilco, just south of Mexico City, lies an island so haunting and saturated with tragedy that it has become the subject of chilling bedtime stories. Also known as La Isla de las Muñecas, which translates to the Island of the Dolls, this eerie patch of land is littered with hundreds of decaying, dismembered, and disfigured dolls hanging from trees, nailed to trunks, and strung from wires, staring out at visitors with lifeless, milky eyes. The origin of the dolls are as creepy as the island itself. The story begins in the 1950s when a man named Don Julian Santana Barrera, a hermit and a farmer, chose to isolate himself on this remote island in the canals. He wasn't running from the law or society. He was simply escaping the world, possibly disillusioned by life in the city. But what awaited him in isolation was a mystery darker than anything he could have imagined. One day, Don Julian reportedly discovered the body of a young girl who had drowned in the canal near his island. Some versions of the story claim that he heard cries for help, but arrived too late. Her spirit, he believed, lingered on the island, uneasy and restless. Shortly after the girl's death, Don Julian found a doll floating in the canal. Believing it belonged to the girl, he hung it on a tree in her honor as a gesture of respect and perhaps a way to help her soul find peace. But peace never came. After placing the first doll, Don Julian began hearing whispers in the night, footsteps in the dark, and the sounds of a girl sobbing near the edge of the water. Fearing the spirit was not appeased, he began collecting more dolls, hanging them from every tree, nail, and corner of the island. Not just intact dolls, he gathered broken dolls, dismembered heads, burnt faces, eyeless torsos. Some were found in the canal, others traded for vegetables in nearby villages. As years passed, the island became a grotesque forest of plastic children's limbs tangled in branches, hair matted with rain, eyes hollowed out by sun and time. What began as a memorial became an obsession and maybe even a form of madness. Locals who visited the island said Don Julian spoke to the dolls. He claimed they came alive at night. He told of hearing them whispering to each other and even moving their heads, yet he never stopped. He believed he was protecting the island from evil and that the dolls were guardians, not threats. In a strange twist that only adds to the legend, Don Julian died in 2001 in the exact same spot where he claimed the girl drowned decades before. Many believe this is more than a coincidence. His death, like hers, is now wrapped in layers of mystery and speculation. Some say the spirit finally took him. Others claim the dolls demanded a soul. After his death, the island became a macabre tourist attraction, and the dolls remain untouched, just as he had left them.
This is the tree we were talking about, right? Wow, God, look at that spider! That's huge!
Oh my God!
That's so scary. Dude, no, are you gonna make a jump? I don't want to be over here. We can see it! Is that dog?
Today, visitors brave enough to explore the Xochimilco canals can take a boat ride right out to La Isla de las Muñecas. There are no grand facilities or guided tours, just the quiet lapping of water, the creaking of trees, and the endless gaze of countless doll eyes following your every move. Some tourists report hearing unexplained noises, giggles, whispers, the splash of something or someone falling into the water. Others feel a coldness, an overwhelming sense of being watched. Mediums and paranormal investigators often describe the island as charged, a place where the spiritual veil is thin. On Google Maps, the island appears deceptively calm. Satellite imagery shows a lush green spot surrounded by the quiet canals. But zoom in closer and you'll see the outlines of hanging forms, tiny scattered shadows of the hundreds of dolls that occupy the island like a silent army. The Island of the Dolls isn't frightening just because of its appearance. What makes it deeply unsettling is what it has managed to represent, which is a man's descent into obsession, grief, and perhaps even madness. Whether or not the drowned girl ever existed is still debated. Some say there's no official record of her death. Others insist locals knew her, and that Don Julian's tale was absolutely real. But belief doesn't need proof to be powerful. Don Julian believed the girl haunted him. He believed the dolls were her protection or her prison. That belief consumed the rest of his life, and in turn gave the island its haunted energy. Even today when you visit, you're not just looking at creepy dolls. You're walking through the emotional wreckage of one man's conviction.
That is...
Did it again! Okay! And this is now the second disturbance in this room when I've been in here.
Hey,
Hey,
just in case there's like a faulty wire, bad battery, I think we should take this out of the equation.
There are thousands of haunted places in the world, but La Isla de las Muñecas continues to fascinate and disturb because it blurs the lines between reality and folklore. As intense as the island was, it still pales in comparison to our next Google Map mystery. In the heart of northern Ukraine, a few miles from the Belarusian border, lies one of the most infamous places on Earth, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Spanning roughly 1,000 square miles, this sealed-off region is home to the crumbling remains of Pripyat, a once vibrant city frozen in a moment of catastrophe. Seen from above on Google Maps, it looks like any other Eastern European town: roads, parks, large Soviet-style apartment blocks. But zoom in, and you begin to notice the differences. No cars, no people, no movement. Just rows and rows of abandoned buildings, slowly being overtaken by nature and a rusting Ferris wheel in the middle of an empty amusement park.
Years ago, but the crisis is still with us today. That's because radiation virtually never dies. After the explosion in 1986, the Soviets built a primitive sarcophagus, a tomb, to cover the stricken reactor, but it wasn't meant to last very long, and it hasn't. Engineers say there's still enough radioactive material in there to cause widespread contamination.
This is not a place touched by time. It's a place arrested by disaster caused by human flaws only. At 1:23 a.m., reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded during a safety test gone horribly wrong. The blast released a radioactive cloud that would spread across Europe and remain in the soil for generations. It is still considered the worst nuclear accident in human history. Just a few kilometers away was Pripyat, a model Soviet city built in 1970 to house plant workers and their families. Home to nearly 50,000 residents, it had schools, hospitals, cinemas, swimming pools, and the now iconic amusement park. But when the reactor exploded, no one was warned immediately. Children went to school, people went to work. The radioactive dust, which is deadly but invisible, drifted quietly through the streets. It wasn't until 36 hours later that the entire city was ordered to evacuate. Residents were told to take only essentials. "You'll be back in a few days," authorities said. But the truth was that they never returned. Today, Pripyat stands exactly as it was left, only now it's overgrown, crumbling, and eerily silent. Children's toys still lie scattered in nurseries, and gas masks litter the floors of abandoned schools. The Ferris wheel, built for a May Day celebration that never came, now looms above a cracked and weed-choked plaza. Rusted yellow bumper cars sit in silence, surrounded by trees that now grow through the pavement. It's a Soviet Pompeii preserved not by lava, but by radiation. What makes the exclusion zone so unsettling isn't just its emptiness, it's how normal everything still looks, like the people just stepped out for a moment. a haunting snapshot of life halted mid-step. One of the most surreal things about Chernobyl is how nature has reclaimed the ruins. Deer roam through deserted buildings. Wolves prowl empty streets. Wild horses and lynx now populate the surrounding forests. Even bears, long gone from this part of Europe, have returned. Trees grow inside living rooms. Ivy crawls up hospital walls. Despite the radiation, life persists. And in the absence of human activity, it thrives. But it's a strange kind of life, muted, cautious, and indifferent to the ghosts of human civilization that linger beneath the overgrowth. Radiation can't be seen, smelled, or touched, but the exclusion zone, its presence, is felt everywhere. Geiger counters click and crackle in areas still too dangerous to linger. Hotspots like the Elephant's Foot under Reactor 4, which is an insanely radioactive mass of molten nuclear fuel and reactor core, can still kill in minutes. Even the trees tell the tale. The red forest just outside the plant turned a deep orange shortly after the explosion from radiation exposure. Many of those trees still stand today, untouched and extremely toxic. This invisible danger adds an extra degree of dread. You can walk through the city and see nothing unusual until your dosimeter spikes, reminding you that death is in the dust. Exploring the Chernobyl exclusion zone on Google Maps is a scary experience in itself. Zoom in and you'll see the grid-like structure of Pripyat, straight roads, boxy apartment blocks, playgrounds and parks. But the colors are faded. The rooftops are cracked. Trees grow where cars once parked. The once celebrated Ferris wheel is clearly visible, like a skeletal circle that casts a long shadow. Streets appear paved, but are filled with weeds. There's an unmistakable stillness, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that suggests something went terribly wrong. Google Street View even lets you walk through parts of Pripyat, though not all. What you'll see isn't chaos, but decay, not fire and ruin, but slow, quiet abandonment. And that silence somehow is far more terrifying. Ironically, Chernobyl has become a dark tourism destination. Each year, thousands of visitors, guided and protected, enter the exclusion zone to witness the aftermath firsthand. They explore schools with collapsing ceilings. They photograph rusted hospital equipment. They stand beneath the Ferris wheel, imagining what it would have been like to ride it on that faithful May day. The site also inspired books, games, and films. HBO's Chernobyl series brought the horror of the incident to global audiences, showing the human cost of secrecy and nuclear disaster. Yet, beneath the thrill, the exclusion zone serves as a grim memorial, a cautionary tale about science and the fragility of human safety systems. Although Pripyat will never be fully habitable again, scientists, maintenance crews, and guards still operate inside parts of the zone. The destroyed reactor is now entombed under a massive sarcophagus called the New Safe Confinement, completed in 2016 to prevent further radioactive leaks. Even so, the ghosts of the past remain. While Chernobyl was completely abandoned, some locations were taken over by very strange occupants. Welcome to Nagoro, a near-empty village where the dead and the departed have been replaced with life-size dolls. And they're not just scattered around, they're arranged in scenes, sitting in classrooms, waiting at bus stops, working in fields, or simply staring at passerbys with stitched-on smiles and button eyes. Tucked away in the remote valleys of Shikoku Island, Japan, lies a village unlike any other. While it's not haunted in the traditional sense, there are no gruesome murders or tragic ghosts. But what it offers is something far more unnerving. From a distance, it looks like life is still going on. But step closer, and the chilling truth sets in. This is a village of ghosts made from cloth. Once a bustling rural settlement, Nagoro was like many other small villages across Japan, modest and built on tight-knit community ties. But over the past few decades, Japan's aging population and urban migration have devastated villages like this one. Young people left for cities, and the elderly who remained slowly passed away. At its peak, Nagoro had over 300 residents. Today, less than 30 people live there permanently. Homes are empty, schools are closed, and businesses are shuttered. But where most villages fade into obscurity, Nagoro took a strange turn, all thanks to one woman and her needle. The story of the dolls begins with Tsukimi Ayano, a former resident who moved away from Nagoro for work and returned years later to find her village nearly deserted. In the early 2000s, while gardening one day, she created a scarecrow shaped like her late father and placed it on her family's land. It didn't scare off birds, but it sparked an idea. What if she brought the village back to life, not with people, but with dolls? Since then, Tsukimi has made over 350 life-size dolls, each one carefully crafted by hand using straw, old clothes, newspaper, and fabric. She doesn't just make them as decorations. She recreates the likeness of real people who once lived in Nagoro. Her neighbors, friends, classmates, workers. Some are based on memory, others on old photos.
Beer? This woman's oranges have rotted. It's maybe a little too realistic. This woman's got a smartphone with a shattered screen. I mean, that makes sense. Seen two older people here, older lady and an old guy who still live here apparently, but from what I hear, there's very, very few people who do. They're just older people who, like, this is just their home and they don't want to leave.
She places them where they once belonged. A former fisherman now sits by the river. Children attend a class in the closed-down school, and old women gather on benches, seemingly chatting forever. Walking through Nagoro is an experience like no other. At first, it feels charming, almost playful, until you realize just how quiet it is. The dolls are eerily lifelike in posture and presence. Many have hand-painted faces, each with distinct expressions. Some smile sweetly, others appear grim, vacant, or oddly melancholic. All of them seem to be in the middle of doing something, but there's no sound. Just the rustle of wind through the trees and the silent stares of hundreds of unblinking eyes. Perhaps the most iconic and unsettling spot in Nagoro is the abandoned schoolhouse, which closed in 2012 due to lack of students. Now, dozens of dolls attend class, sitting at wooden desks facing a chalkboard. There's a teacher too, just another doll frozen mid-lecture. It's the perfect recreation of a moment that no longer exists. Visitors say it's like stepping into a memory or a dream you don't want to stay in too long. And yet, people are drawn to it because something about it feels alive, even though it isn't. Nagoro isn't meant to be scary. Tsukimi Ayano didn't create the dolls to frighten people. In her eyes, it's an act of preservation, keeping the memory of the village alive, refusing to let it vanish into history. Each doll is a tribute to someone who mattered, a physical echo of a life once lived. But to outsiders, the sheer volume and realism of these figures give the village an aura that sits somewhere between touching and terrifying. It raises questions that are hard to shake off. What does it mean to replace the dead? Can a replica ever truly capture a soul? Is this creativity or just plain denial? And finally, why does it feel like the dolls are somehow watching? Even if you never visit Nagoro in person, you can explore it on Google Maps. On Street View, the scenes are quiet but striking. You'll see dolls on porches, fields, and bus stops, often mistaken at first glance for real people. Then you realize they're too still and way too silent.
あれ、どうぞ写真撮って中入って。上がって撮って。で、つけたのか上がって。違うんだよ。
Wow. This is a doll wedding.
はい、はい。上がって撮んない。
She says come in.
先生が出てくるよ。
先生も作ったのか。
うんうん。一人先生一人ですよ。
一人だけ
うん。一人で教えるのは生きてるね。教えるのは生きてるけどね。アパートは川ワーク近くで。で、これから。
Zoom in and you'll see the details. Sewn faces, mismatched buttons for eyes, hats hiding straw-filled heads. But the eeriest part is the fact that Google's face-blurring algorithm sometimes kicks in on the dolls, mistaking them for humans, which is a subtle reminder that even artificial intelligence can be tricked by Nagoro's uncanny stillness. Nagoro has become a strange kind of tourist attraction, not for thrill seekers, but for those curious about what happens when a village dies but just refuses to disappear. The dolls are a form of resistance against forgetting, but they also speak to our fear of being alone and of the haunting quiet that follows absence. There are no horror stories about Nagoro, nothing about horrific murders or angry spirits, and yet it remains one of the creepiest places you can find on Google Maps, because here, the ghosts don't scream or float. They just sit quietly in chairs, waiting. Hidden among the dense pine forest of Brandenburg, just south of Berlin, lies a sprawling medical complex that feels like it belongs in a gothic horror novel. A place of whispers, peeling paint, and ghostly echoes. This is Beelitz-Heilstätten, an abandoned hospital so vast and haunting that even its silence feels infected. Once hailed as a symbol of medical advancement, Beelitz-Heilstätten now stands in stark contrast to its former purpose. No longer a sanctuary of healing, but a decaying monument to war and time. And perhaps the most chilling detail of all about the place is the fact that it's a location where Adolf Hitler was treated long before he became a name that would shape the course of world history. The hospital originally built in 1898 as a state-of-the-art sanatorium for tuberculosis patients. At the time, tuberculosis, called the White Plague, was ravaging Europe. Sanatoriums were built in isolated natural environments where patients could receive fresh air, rest, and careful treatment. Beelitz-Heilstätten was designed with both functionality and serenity in mind. It became a massive complex of over 60 buildings, featuring everything from treatment halls and surgery wings to kitchens, administrative offices, and underground tunnels connecting it all. The architecture itself had impressive red brick facades, tall arched windows, and decorative tiles. Back then, it was a place of innovation, hygiene, and hope. But that hope would be short-lived. During World War I, the hospital was converted into a military treatment center for injured German soldiers. One of them was a young corporal named Adolf Hitler, who arrived at Beelitz in October 1916, having been wounded by shrapnel during the Battle of the Somme. He spent time recovering in one of the hospital's wings, walking the same long corridors that now echo only with decay. Though this fact is historically verified, it's never spoken of with pride. In many ways, Beelitz carries the burden of having once nursed one of the world's most destructive figures, and that's only the beginning of its dark legacy. During World War II, Beelitz-Heilstätten once again became a military hospital, this time under Nazi control. It treated German soldiers and high-ranking officers and was partially managed by the Wehrmacht. Though never directly associated with medical experiments, its connection to the Nazi war machine is unsettling. As Berlin fell in 1945, the hospital became a site of frantic final efforts to treat wounded Nazis until it was overtaken by the Soviet Red Army. From 1945 until 1994, Beelitz served as a Soviet military hospital, making it one of the largest Soviet facilities outside Russia. Its long halls, were filled once again with soldiers, this time speaking Russian. The Soviets rarely allowed German citizens near the area, and the complex became increasingly sealed off, mysterious, and isolated. Even Erich Honecker, the former East German leader, was treated here for liver cancer in the early 1990s, just before the reunification of Germany. But after the Cold War ended, the Soviet army withdrew, and Beelitz was left behind for good. Since its closure in 1994, Beelitz-Heilstätten has slipped into decay. Today, many of the buildings still stand, but in various states of collapse and ruin. Nature has begun to reclaim the hospital. Vines crawl across floors, moss grow on ceilings, entire trees burst through open roofs. It is beautiful in the way that only decay can be, which is poetic, tragic, and utterly unnerving. One of the creepiest features of Beelitz is its labyrinth of underground tunnels. These passageways, originally built for transporting patients and supplies between buildings in the harsh German winters, now stretch like veins beneath the forest floor. They are long, damp, and dark, lined with rusted pipes and eerie silence. Explorers say they can hear their own breath, their own heartbeat, and sometimes something else. It's no wonder the place is considered one of the most haunted locations in Germany. The haunting beauty of Beelitz has drawn filmmakers, artists, and urban explorers from around the world. Scenes from The Pianist, 2002, and Valkyrie, 2008, were filmed here. Countless horror films, music videos, and documentaries have used the decaying hallways as backdrops. Though not officially designated a haunted site, Beelitz is the source of countless ghost stories. Visitors report feelings of dread, the sense of being watched, and even shadowy figures seen from the corner of the eye. Some claim to hear hospital machines beeping in the distance. Others swear they've seen beds move or doors close by themselves. While much of this can be attributed to suggestion and fear, there's no denying that Beelitz feels wrong in places, as if the energy of the past still lingers, trapped between the crumbling bricks and broken tiles. Today, parts of the Beelitz complex have been restored or repurposed. Some buildings are now medical centers again. Others have been converted into luxury apartments. But large sections remain untouched and sealed off, slowly being devoured by time. There's even a treetop walkway, allowing tourists to view the ruins from above. But most of the complex remains under tight security, accessible only on guided tours or through the brave and sometimes illegal efforts of urban explorers. It exists in a strange state of half-forgotten, half-revived, like a body that refuses to fully die or fully heal. Next, we have an island that still haunts Japan till this day. Off the coast of Nagasaki, surrounded by dark ocean waters and sea winds, sits an island that seems too strange and probably too cinematic to be real. But from afar, it resembles a warship made of concrete looming and impenetrable. But this isn't a battleship at all. This is Hashimi Island, known by its nickname, Gunkanjima Battleship Island. Once a thriving hub of industry and coal mining, Gunkanjima is now a crumbling concrete labyrinth left to decay in the elements. Its dense buildings, ghostly silence, and apocalyptic landscape give it an unmistakable dystopian feel, making it one of the creepiest abandoned places on Google Maps and in the real world. Gunkanjima's story begins in 1887, when coal was discovered beneath the island. Japan, racing toward industrialization during the Meiji era, quickly seized the opportunity. The Mitsubishi Corporation bought the island in 1890 and transformed it into a coal mining colony. But space was tight. The entire island measures just 0.063 square kilometers, or 16 acres, which is roughly the size of 16 football fields. To house workers and maximize production, Mitsubishi built some of the first concrete high-rise buildings in Japan, stacking apartments, dormitories, schools, stores, and entertainment spaces like bricks in a box. By the 1950s, over 5,000 people lived in Gunkanjima, making it one of the most densely populated places on Earth. There were no trees, no grass, no roads, only walls, stairs, and corridors. Everything was stacked vertically. The buildings rose like towers on a battleship deck. But the island wasn't just cramped, it was functional. It had a school, hospital, bathhouses, rooftop gardens, a movie theater, and even a pachinko parlor. Life was hard, but self-contained. While Gunkanjima may sound like a feat of industrial ingenuity, there's a dark undercurrent to its history. During World War II, when Japan's labor shortage grew severe, Korean and Chinese forced laborers were brought to the island. Conditions in the mines were brutal. Workers faced extreme heat, risk of collapse, and constant exposure to coal dust. Many died underground, but there are no public graves. Their stories for decades were largely forgotten or unacknowledged. For those above ground, life wasn't much easier. Typhoons and waves regularly battered the island. Children played on rooftops because there was no space for playgrounds. Every square inch was functional or vertical. People were safe from the outside world, but prisoners of this concrete cage. By the 1960s, Japan's energy policy began shifting from coal to petroleum, and Hashimi's future dimmed. As demand dropped, Mitsubishi announced the closure of the mine in 1974. Within weeks, the island was evacuated. Workers and their families left behind clothes, furniture, tools, dishes, even memories. They were told that they might return someday, so many packed lightly. But no one came back, and just like that, once a beacon of industrial power, became a ghost island. Today, the island remains exactly as it was abandoned, except everything is now cracked, rusted, or just collapsing. But more terrifying than an abandoned island is an underground nation solely built for the dead, and such a location is the next item on our list. Beneath the glamorous surface of Paris and beneath the Eiffel Tower, we found a whole different city. Unlike the famous metropolis above, we have a city of shadows of silence and bones. It's called the Catacombs of Paris, and it holds the remains of over 6 million souls, arranged in a haunting tapestry of skulls, femurs, and forgotten names. While millions flock to Paris for love and lights, deep below their footsteps is something far more chilling. A silent realm where death is stacked floor to ceiling, in stone-lined corridors that stretch endlessly into blackness. This is not just a creepy location on Google Maps. It's a confrontation with mortality, history, and the unspoken weight of time. To understand the catacombs, you have to start with 18th century Paris, a city growing too quickly for its own good. By the 1700s, Paris's cemeteries were overflowing. Literally. The Cimetière des Innocents, one of the oldest burial grounds, had become so packed with corpses that the stench was unbearable. Walls cracked under pressure from mass graves. Disease began to spread from rotting bodies buried just below the surface. People were falling ill, not from plagues or war, but from their neighbors' decomposing remains. At this point, a solution was desperately needed, and the answers just happened to come from below. Long before the catacombs held bones, there were limestone quarries. Paris, like many old cities, were built using materials pulled from its own earth. The result was a vast network of tunnels beneath the city, abandoned after centuries of excavation. These old quarry tunnels, many up to 20 meters or 65 feet underground, became the perfect space to relocate the dead out of sight, out of smell, out of mind. Starting in 1786, the French government began the mass transfer of bodies from overburdened cemeteries into these tunnels. The process took decades. Cartloads of bones were moved under cover of night, blessed by priests as they were stacked anonymously into piles. This wasn't a neat process. The bones of countless men, women, and children were jumbled together, their names lost forever and reduced to a silent, skeletal archive of humanity. As the bones accumulated, something remarkable happened. Rather than tossing them into piles, workers began to arrange them with eerie precision. Skulls formed perfect walls. Femurs with tibias were stacked in geometric patterns. In some sections, heart-shaped arrangements of bones decorate the passages. The result is both horrific and beautiful, a macabre form of underground architecture unlike anything else in the world. Plaques in Old French mark the origin of the bones. From the Cemetery of the Innocents, 1787, others carry philosophical warnings like, "Stop, this is the empire of death." They weren't exaggerating. The publicly accessible portion of the catacombs spans about 1.5 kilometers, just under a mile, but that's just a fragment. The entire underground ossuary stretches more than 200 miles, an unimaginable labyrinth of bones, darkness, and silence. Many parts are illegal to explore. Some are completely unmapped. And yet, that hasn't stopped people from trying. Urban explorers known as cataphiles sneak into hidden entrances and vanish into the depths, some for days at a time. A few never make it back. There are rumors of underground cinemas, dining rooms, and even secret concerts held within the catacombs. Spray-painted arrows guide explorers deeper, but one wrong turn in that subterranean maze and you could be lost forever, surrounded by millions of dead, with no map and no way out. Today, the catacombs are one of Paris's most popular attractions, drawing tourists eager to see death up close. Visitors walk narrow, dripping corridors where the temperature drops and the air is thick. The catacombs haven't just been a place for the dead. They've also played a part in revolutions, resistance, and rumor. During the French Revolution, rebels used the tunnels for secret meetings and escapes. Also in World War II, the French resistance used them to hide from Nazi forces, and even the Nazis, in turn, used other parts of the catacombs as bunkers. And over the years, legends have emerged of lost souls, vanished explorers, and tunnels that collapse behind intruders. In 2004, police found a fully equipped underground movie theater, complete with electricity, seating, a bar, and a stocked kitchen hidden in the forbidden zone. When they returned, it was gone. Who built it? No one knows. Zooming in on the catacomb via Google Maps shows a surprisingly ordinary city grid of Parisian streets and neighborhoods. But knowing what's underneath changes everything. Right beneath the chic cafes and metro stops lie tunnels filled with bones older than modern France itself. If Google allowed you to street view the ossuary tunnels, you'd feel the chill instantly and probably even digitally. Some users claim they can sense the eeriness even through the screen, but nothing compares to standing there in that cold, silent space and knowing that each skull once held a life. What could be worse than the city of the dead? A burning city, perhaps. Centralia, Pennsylvania, once a thriving mining town, now has become a ghost town haunted not by spirits, but by something far more persistent and invisible: fire. An underground coal fire, to be exact, one that's been burning beneath the town since 1962 and shows no sign of stopping. Centralia was founded in 1866 and quickly grew into a busy mining community. The anthracite coal buried beneath its soil was valuable, and people came from across the country to work the mines, raise families, and build lives. At its peak, Centralia had over 1,000 residents, a school, several churches, grocery stores, bars, and row homes neatly lined along quiet Pennsylvania streets. But like so many towns built on a single industry, Centralia was always tied to coal, and ultimately, it would be coal that destroyed it. It began in May of 1962 in what seemed like a routine task. City workers were cleaning up the town landfill, a common practice before Memorial Day. To reduce waste, they decided to set the trash on fire, hoping it would burn out quickly, as it had in previous years. But this time, something went wrong. Flames slipped through cracks in the pit's floor and ignited a coal seam, a deep underground layer of coal that stretches for miles. That spark triggered a subterranean inferno, and within days, smoke began to seep through the ground. Attempts to extinguish the fire failed. Workers poured sand, clay, and water into the shafts. They dug trenches to cut it off. Nothing worked. By the time they realized the fire had spread too far, it was too late.
Problem with the ghost town that only has 4 people is they can be a little difficult to find.
Well, like this is Main Street right here.
This is Main Street. Driving down Main Street in a ghost town, near ghost town.
Can you imagine? There's a guy out there. There's 2 guys there. Let's go.
Why did everybody decide to leave?
Money.
Really?
Money talks, bullshit walks.
Yeah. So the government bought it up?
Yeah.
Are the young people not working, or are they moving away?
Cut the welfare and everything.
Cut the welfare out. That's giving all the money for nothing.
And then
Nobody wants to work, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What about immigrants? Would you want immigrants?
I guess if they're legal workers. Mexicans are good workers.
Yeah.
They're good workers, the ones I see. They
Yeah.
work. And they're on that. When you see them around here, they're doing, you know, they come here to get welfare. That's all they get.
Good.
But they're coming around here, they're overtaking us.
At first, residents didn't panic. Smoke coming from the ground was strange, but not yet terrifying. People carried on with their lives. But as months turned into years, the signs became impossible to ignore. Soon yards became too hot to the touch. Some roads cracked open, releasing poisonous gases. Even sinkholes suddenly collapsed beneath people's feet, and the ground itself became unstable. Heated by a fire burning up to 480 degrees Celsius, just a few feet below. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski fell into a sinkhole that opened beneath his feet in his grandmother's backyard. The hole was over 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep. He clung to a tree root and was rescued, but the event became national news. That's when the world started paying attention. In the years that followed, it became clear Centralia was dying. The U.S. government began buying out properties. Homeowners were offered relocation packages. Slowly, residents began to leave. In 1992, Pennsylvania used eminent domain to condemn all the remaining properties. Houses were bulldozed. Streets were erased from maps. In 2002, the town's zip code, 17927, was officially revoked. Today, only a handful of residents remain, less than 10, all of whom fought legal battles to stay until death. The town has no stores, no schools, no churches, just ruins, trees, and steam. And yet the fire still burns below. What makes Centralia so haunting isn't just the history, it's the way the town looks today. Google Maps shows empty roads that lead to nowhere, surrounded by forested hills. But if you zoom in close, especially on the infamous Route 61, you'll see something surreal. A long stretch of highway split and cracked down the center, with thick vines growing out and graffiti covering every inch. This place is known as Graffiti Highway. It's been covered in art, messages, and warnings by explorers and daredevils who visit Centralia. Although the site was covered with dirt in 2020 to discourage tourism, its legacy remains burned into internet folklore.
That was coming through the earth. But this church was the one church, and they kept it because geologists came and they said they looked underneath and there was no chemicals coming up. There was not a mine beneath this. So they were able to keep it. And what the guy said was he said they had to put up these no trespassing signs because people are coming and breaking in, stealing stuff out of the cemetery. He said because it's a Russian Orthodox church, but we read it's a Ukrainian Orthodox church. I mean, it's beautiful, and it's also in great condition, which is interesting because the rest of this town has been totally, I mean, there's nothing left.
Smoke still rises from vents in the ground. Some days, the air is thick with the smell of sulfur, rotten eggs, and ash. Dead trees lie twisted across abandoned lots. Nature has reclaimed most of the buildings, but the ghost of civilization lingers. The question many people ask is, why can't we just put it out? The answer lies in geology and logistics. The anthracite coal seam beneath Centralia is vast miles wide and hundreds of feet thick. Once ignited, it acts like a self-feeding furnace. Every new crack in the earth becomes a new oxygen source, helping the fire spread. Some experts estimate that it could burn for another 250 years. To extinguish it, it would require digging up thousands of acres of land, moving millions of tons of rock and soil, not just dangerous and expensive, but nearly impossible. In a way, Centralia is a man-made volcano, but one that can't erupt, only smolder. Though largely abandoned, Centralia continues to draw curious travelers, urban explorers, and disaster tourists. They come not for what's there, but for what's not. The haunting absence of life, the unnatural heat, the sense that this place shouldn't exist, and yet it does burn quietly beneath the surface. Centralia is more than a ghost town. It's a warning, a reminder of what can happen when we lose control of what lies beneath, when small mistakes become unstoppable disasters, and when nature takes back what we tried to tame. Up next is what happens when a sick joke is taken to a whole new level. In the heart of the Nevada desert, far from the glittering lights of Las Vegas and the buzzing slot machines of Reno, stands a place that seems torn straight from a horror movie.
And that theme.
That's the Clown Motel, nestled in the old mining town of Tonopah. And when viewed on Google Maps, it might seem almost comical at first, until reality sets in. Because few places blend kitsch and creep quite like this. If you've got a fear of clowns, this is probably your worst nightmare. And yet, there it is, right off US Route 95, surrounded by desert, wind, and ghosts of the past. The Clown Motel was opened in the 1980s by siblings Leona and Leroy David in memory of their late father, Clarence David, who just so happens to be buried in the cemetery next door. Leroy had a fascination with clowns and began decorating the motel with a modest collection of clown dolls and memorabilia. Over the decades, that collection grew into the hundreds, spilling into every room, every hallway, and the lobby, which looks like a clown museum from a surreal dream. Imagine pulling up to a roadside motel on a long desert drive. The sign is smiling, painted with a cartoonish clown face, but the shadows it casts stretch long into the afternoon sun. You approach the lobby and are greeted by walls filled, floor to ceiling, with porcelain, plastic, and plush clowns. Their painted grins fixed permanently, some joyful, some grotesque. Their wide eyes seems to follow you.
Leroy asked me if I wanted to buy the motel, and I said, yeah. He says, I've never had a problem with clowns. No, I have no problem with it now. I'll be glad to take it over, and I hope to build a collection up, which I've done. I've taken it from about 150 clowns up to over 600 clowns. Ever since I took the motel over, I've gone to yard sales and estate sales, and I've been even out of town. I've gone to and picked up clowns. We have clowns that have been sent to us from all over the world. Sometimes people call me and they have a collection for sale, and if it's not too much, I'll buy it. So it's kind of unique, and so we have clowns from everywhere. Yeah, they're all over the place.
Well, this isn't a theme park. It's real, and you can actually stay the night. As if hundreds of clowns weren't enough, the Clown Motel sits immediately adjacent to the Tonopah Cemetery, which only adds to the motel's infamous status. The cemetery dates back to 1901 and holds the remains of over 300 people, including miners killed in tragic accidents, victims of a deadly 1905 plague, and many early settlers of Tonopah who succumbed to the harshness of desert life. Some gravestones are cracked or leaning, weathered by time. Others are mere markers sinking into the sand. A few visitors report seeing figures in the cemetery at night or hearing whispers on the windless evenings. So yes, you're not only sleeping among clowns, you're sleeping beside the dead. From a satellite view, the Clown Motel doesn't look especially terrifying. It's a low-slung, classic roadside motel, the kind you would expect to find in any dusty American town. But when you zoom in on Street View, things change. You're met with murals of giant clowns painted across the walls. One waves at you, eternally cheerful. Others leer in silence. You can spot decorative figures outside, giant clown statues, weathered by the sun and wind. Step a few virtual feet to the east, and you'll see the gates of the cemetery, often photographed with strange fog or orbs hovering over graves. The contrast between joyful chaos and eternal rest is jarring. While Street View only shows the exterior, those who ventured inside describe something even more unsettling. The lobby is an explosion of color and chaos. Over 500 clowns, figurines, posters, paintings, masks, and toys stare at you from every angle. Some are childlike, some are vintage, some are downright disturbing. Guest rooms are similarly themed, many decorated with specific horror characters, including nods to Pennywise from It, the Joker, or old-school circus clowns with sharp teeth and unsettling eyes. The new owners who took over in 2019 leaned into the motel's fame and intentionally added more themed rooms to appeal to horror fans and thrill seekers. But even for those who love clowns, there's a palpable discomfort. Guests often report feeling watched. Some claim the clowns move slightly overnight. Others swear they've heard giggling in the dark when no one else was around.
Out there and have them fill them on outside because they had so much anxiety in here at the motel inside the office here that they couldn't handle it.
Oh,
so
wow.
I've gone in, I put towels over the clown pictures in rooms because they said we can't, if you'll take them down or put something over them, I can't have a clown looking at me. So that's happened, but that's a very, very small number of people did that.
What's your whole stance just like on the paranormal in general?
Well, it's so different because we have this cemetery right next to us.
With the cemetery so close and the motel's bizarre theme, it's no surprise the Clown Motel has developed a reputation for being haunted. Now let's head over to a location with a truly tragic history. In the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, halfway between Australia and Hawaii, lies one of the smallest nations in the world, Nauru. A tiny coral island, just 21 square kilometers in size, it barely shows up on a map. Yet, it's home to one of the most haunting locations you can zoom in on through Google Maps. The Nauru Regional Processing Center, more widely known as the Nauru Detention Center. From above, the center doesn't look like much. You'll spot a fenced compound, tin-roofed structures, and pale walkways surrounded by scrubby brush and red soil. But what it lacks in dramatic visuals, it more than makes up for in political controversy, psychological darkness, and an overwhelming sense of isolation that feels chilling, even from your screen. The Nauru Detention Center was established in 2001 under Australia's Pacific Solution policy, designed to deter asylum seekers arriving by boat. Rather than allowing them to reach Australian shores and claim asylum there, the government diverted them to offshore processing centers, primarily in Nauru and Papua New Guinea's Manus Island. Though described as processing centers, these were essentially prison camps closed off, surrounded by guards and fences, and controlled through contracts with private security and maintenance firms. Australia provided substantial aid in exchange for Nauru's cooperation, turning the island into a reluctant partner, one of the most criticized immigration policies of the 21st century. Zoom in on the Nauru Detention Center and you'll see it stands in stark contrast to the tropical beauty around it. Nauru's coastlines are bright blue and green, scattered with palms and reefs. But move inland and the terrain becomes rocky, rough, and barren as a result of decades of phosphate mining that stripped much of the island's vegetation. Here, the detention center was built. Its military-style layout, orderly rows of white buildings, security perimeters, watchtowers, and shipping containers looks more like a war zone than a refuge.
Trying to break in. So he asked me to stay calm and help calm the asylum seekers who were getting upset.
So were you padlocked into the compound at that time?
Yes.
So you're padlocked in, and are you the only Salvation Army person in there at the time?
Yes.
And how many asylum seekers are there with you?
500. The asylum seekers were saying things to me like, "Don't worry, we'll look out for you, you're our sister." But at the same time, we were pretty frightened.
There are no cheerful colors, no welcoming signs, just functionality, security, and sterility. It's as if the place was designed to be as emotionally void as possible, clearly a space of containment, not care. Although the name processing center implies a temporary, bureaucratic step, many people, including children, were held here for years. Reports from humanitarian groups, journalists, and former detainees paint a disturbing picture. Conditions included extreme heat and little shelter from the tropical sun, plus inadequate medical care and poor sanitation, limited food, often culturally inappropriate or insufficient in nutrients, and cramped quarters, with entire families sharing spaces no bigger than a shipping container. Worse still was the psychological toll. Numerous independent investigations reported high levels of self-harm, even among children, suicide attempts, depression and PTSD, sexual assault, particularly against women and minors. Some detainees were not informed of their legal status for years. Others were told they would never settle in Australia, leaving them in a limbo with no future in sight. From behind the fences, the outside world must have felt galaxies away. From Google Maps, all of this suffering is invisible, but once you know the secret, even the satellite view feels heavy with sorrow. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Nauru Detention Center is its lack of transparency. Journalists were almost never granted access. Aid workers were often banned from speaking publicly. Whistleblowers faced prosecution under Australian law. The Australian government's message was clear: don't look too closely. But some still did. In 2016, The Guardian published the Nauru Files, a collection of over 2,000 leaked incident reports from inside the center, detailing assaults, abuse, hunger strikes, and trauma among detainees. The world recoiled, but even after public outrage, little changed for a long time. For the people of Nauru, the detention center brought jobs, money, and foreign aid, but also shame and unrest. While some saw it as necessary for economic survival, others viewed it as turning their homeland into a prison island. The center altered the island's character. Armed guards patrolled an area once accessible to all. The international spotlight, when it occasionally flickered on, was never kind. This tiny island, already struggling with poverty and environmental degradation, now bore the weight of another country's moral burden. As international pressure mounted, the detention center was declared closed in 2019, but closed turned out to be a slippery word. Australia continued to detain people on the island, housing them in so-called alternative accommodations. Though the fences and containers may look emptier now, the trauma lingers. For those who were once imprisoned here, and for the island that hosted them. In 2023, Australia and Nauru renewed their agreement, allowing the center to be reopened at any time. As of 2025, the facility remains on standby, a ghost of a system that could be revived at any moment. Unlike Clown Motels or ghost towns, the Nauru Detention Center doesn't scare with abandoned beds or flickering lights. It is scary because it's real, because people lived here, suffered here, broke down here. It's a place where desperation met bureaucracy, where dreams of safety collided with barbed wire. And the most disturbing thing, it's all very clean, very orderly. There are no bodies, no ruins, just structures, fences, metal, as if someone tried to erase the human element completely. But they couldn't. Because even from above, you can feel the weight of what happened here. Tucked away in the leafy woods of East Sussex, England, lies the crumbling remains of Hellingly Hospital, once one of the most advanced psychiatric institutions in the UK. Now, when you zoom in on this place through Google Maps, the overhead view reveals an unsettling contrast. Nature slowly swallowing the past, roofs caved in, and building wings crumbling like a skeleton picked clean by time. It's not just the architecture that makes Hellingly haunting, it's what the place represents. A century of broken minds, misunderstood illness, and the long, painful evolution of mental health care. From its carefully planned beginnings to its eerie modern-day decay, Hellingly is a place where silence speaks volumes. Hellingly Hospital, originally called East Sussex County Asylum, opened in 1903 after nearly a decade of planning and construction. It was part of a wave of large-scale mental institutions built across the UK during the Victorian and Edwardian eras. They were designed to be self-sustaining, isolated communities, often placed far from major cities so that patients could be treated in peace and out of sight. Designed by the famed asylum architect George Thomas Hine, Hellingly was a masterpiece of its time. It featured red brick buildings, arched windows, beautifully tiled corridors, and manicured grounds. There were male and female wards, recreation halls, a chapel, staff housing, and even a railway branch line to bring in coal and supplies. To outsiders, it might have looked like a prestigious boarding school or countryside estate, but inside, the reality was often darker. Hellingly was built to treat around 700 patients. Some were admitted voluntarily for conditions like depression or anxiety. Others were committed against their will for moral insanity, postnatal depression, schizophrenia, or behaviors society deemed unacceptable, like homosexuality or epilepsy. Treatments varied across decades, evolving from rest and fresh air to more aggressive forms of therapy like electroconvulsive therapy, insulin shock therapy, isolation, straitjackets and restraints, later lobotomies in extreme cases. For many, the hospital became a place of lifelong institutionalization. Even after their conditions improved, some patients never left, either abandoned by families, unable to adapt to the outside world, or deemed unfit to return. Despite good intentions by some staff, the asylum system often stripped patients of autonomy and identity. Hellingly, like many of its era, became both a sanctuary and a prison. Hellingly continued operations through both world wars and into the 20th century, but by the 1980s, the tide had turned. The UK government moved toward community-based mental health care, and large institutions like Hellingly were seen as outdated and even inhumane. In 1994, after 91 years of operation, Hellingly Hospital closed its doors for good, but the story didn't end there. Unlike many defunct hospitals that were quickly demolished, Hellingly was left to rot. Nature crept in, roofs caved, moss swallowed walls, trees burst through windows. Vandals, thrill-seekers, and ghost hunters came in droves, leaving behind graffiti, broken glass, and tales of strange occurrences. From Google Maps, you can still trace the footprints of the hospital, an eerie sprawl of rectangular blocks and winding paths. Zoom in and you'll catch hints of decay, collapsed roofing, shattered glass glinting in the light, and vegetation overrunning corridors where nurses once walked. The satellite view is so unnaturally still, it almost looks frozen in time. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, Hellingly has all the ingredients of a classic haunted location, with a remote forest setting, a history of trauma and confinement, an abandoned structure with decaying beauty, and dozens of first-hand reports of paranormal activity. Visitors have claimed to hear whispers, screams, or the echoes of footsteps in empty hallways. Some report sudden temperature drops, flickering lights, or strange shadows captured on camera. Even Google Street View, which doesn't reach deep inside the ruins, contributes to the mystery. When viewed from the road, the fenced-off perimeter and partially visible wings give the impression that something is being deliberately hidden. The true haunting, however, might not be supernatural. In the early 2000s, urban explorers flocked to Hellingly. It became a hotspot for photographers and thrill-seekers, drawn to the hospital's aesthetic of decay-peeling paint, rusted wheelchairs, long-forgotten furniture, and patient records scattered across floors, like a horror movie set. But as the years wore on, vandalism escalated. Fires broke out. Sections of the hospital became dangerously unstable. Eventually, the site was fenced off and deemed too unsafe for exploration. Starting in the late 2010s, developers began demolishing large sections of the hospital to make way for new housing. Some wings were repurposed or preserved, but much of Hellingly's original structure has now been erased from existence. Still, the satellite view on Google Maps can sometimes show ghostly outlines of traces of walls and foundations that once held generations of patience, secrets, and sorrow. There's something deeply symbolic about abandoned asylums like Hellingly. They're monuments to society's past fears, failures, and evolving understanding of the mind. Where once people were hidden away and written off as lunatics, today we strive, however imperfectly, for inclusion and compassion. But walking through the ruins virtually or in person, you can't help but feel the weight of collective guilt. For how many lives were wasted behind those walls? How many could have been saved with kindness instead of confinement?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Can we find access to this massive, gigantic old hospital? Well, I think we can.
That was a shred.
That was.
Is that the way in?
Right, in you go, Ted.
Now, let's take a look at one of the most iconic locations that can be seen using the Google Map. In the heart of the Karakum Desert, surrounded by vast nothingness and wind-swept sand dunes, lies a burning pit that has been on fire non-stop for more than 5 decades. To the unknowing eye on Google Maps, it appears like a circular scorch mark, a reddish-orange glow in the midst of barren land. But zoom in closer, and you'll see the outline of something far more disturbing. This is the Door to Hell, or Darvaza gas crater, a gaping wound in the Earth's crust that spews flames, heat, and poisonous gases into the sky 24 hours a day. Locals gave it the nickname for a reason. It looks like hell itself opened up and never closed. The origin story of the Door to Hell begins in 1971, during the Soviet era, when geologists were conducting exploratory drilling in the Karakum Desert. The area is rich in natural gas reserves, and Soviet engineers were looking to exploit it. As they began drilling, their equipment suddenly collapsed into a void, a massive underground cavern filled with natural gas. The ground had given way beneath them, forming a crater about 230 feet wide and 65 feet deep. Fearing that the gas being released from the newly formed pit would be toxic to nearby communities and wildlife, the team made a fateful decision. They lit it on fire. The belief was that the gas would burn off in a matter of days. Well, that was over 50 years ago. What the scientists didn't account for was the sheer volume of natural gas beneath the surface. Instead of burning out, the flames intensified, creating a roaring inferno that continues to this day. Imagine standing at the edge of the Door to Hell, with the air thick with the smell of sulfur and scorched minerals. The ground beneath your feet vibrates slightly with subterranean heat, and flames leap upward from the pit, dancing and snarling, as if something ancient is trying to claw its way to the surface. It's not just a fire, it's a living, breathing monster fueled by the earth itself. And remarkably, it's still burning, defying efforts to extinguish it, regulate it, or even fully understand it. On Google Maps, the Door to Hell appears as a perfectly round, darkened depression, sometimes glowing faintly at night, depending on satellite timing. From above, it looks like an impact crater or volcanic fissure. But when you realize it's been burning continuously since the Cold War, the image becomes far more unsettling. The contrast is especially stark. A ring of lifeless sand surrounds a fiery eye, creating an almost mythological appearance, as if the earth is watching you. No other structure, village, or road exists for miles around, heightening the crater's sense of isolation and mystery. Despite its eerie origins and remote location, the Door to Hell has become Turkmenistan's most bizarre and famous landmark. Brave travelers journey through the desert to witness it firsthand, often camping near the pit for the night. By day, the crater belches hot air and smolders with embers. By night, it becomes truly otherworldly, a glowing cauldron of fire casting flickering shadows across the sand. Photographers, adventure vloggers, and thrill seekers often describe the experience as spiritual, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. There's something primal about staring into a pit of fire that has no beginning and seemingly no end. But not everyone is thrilled by its continued existence. The crater is more than just a tourist curiosity. It's also an environmental nightmare. It burns off methane, one of the most potent greenhouse gases, in a never-ending cycle of waste and pollution. Turkmenistan is home to the fourth largest natural gas reserves in the world, and many have criticized the government for allowing this literal flame to burn unchecked, while the rest of the globe scrambles to address climate change. In 2022, Turkmen President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov publicly called for the crater to be extinguished, citing environmental concerns and economic waste.
Now, Turkmenistan's president has ordered the extinguishing of the country's gateway to hell, a fire that has been burning for decades in a huge desert gas crater. In a televised remark, President said that, and I'm quoting here, "We're losing vulnerable natural resources for which we could get significant profits and use them for improving the well-being of our people." The president further instructed officials to find a solution to extinguish the fire. Gurbanguly wants to put it out for environmental and health reasons as
Experts were tasked with investigating methods to seal the pit or halt its fire safely, but no definitive plan has yet succeeded. Even after political will was applied, the fire remains, as stubborn and untamable as a desert wind around it. The door to hell has become more than just a geological oddity, it's now a symbol. Some see it as a reminder that nature doesn't always obey our calculations or intentions. Others see it as a metaphor for eternal consequence, a man-made mistake that can't be undone, burning through time like a wound we can't close. In local folklore, the crater is whispered about with a mix of fear and reverence. Some believe it truly is cursed, a punishment for drilling too deep or disturbing ancient lands. Regardless of belief, the image of an endless fire, born from a single moment of misjudgment, has embedded itself in modern legend. Finally, let's head over to the site of an unusual anomaly pitched in a location that happens to host one of the world's iconic examples of urban legends. Just beyond the medieval city of Cluj-Napoca in Romania lies a stretch of woodland unlike any other on Earth. Known as Hola Forest, this dense, contorted thicket of trees is often referred to as the world's most haunted forest. It's a place where science falters and visitors leave with more questions than answers. Even from the satellite view on Google Maps, Hola Forest looks off, twisted, unnaturally dense, and strangely circular in parts. But nothing on the screen can prepare you for the deeply unsettling energy that people say pulses through the soil there. The forest gets part of its name from a local shepherd named Bachu, who disappeared within its bounds along with his flock of 200 sheep. Neither he nor the animals were ever found again. No trace, no remains, just gone. Since that first vanishing, stories of missing people, strange lights, and inexplicable illness have stalked the forest folklore. In 1968, the area drew global attention when a military technician named Emil Barnea photographed a disc-shaped UFO hovering in broad daylight over the forest. The image, one of the clearest from that time period, sparked a wave of paranormal investigations. UFO enthusiasts, scientists, all came to Hoya hoping to document something from beyond. What many of them found instead was a growing sense of dread. At the center of Hoya's forest lies a bizarre anomaly, a perfectly circular clearing where, inexplicably, nothing grows. With no trees and no grass, the soil's been tested multiple times and shows no chemical reason for the bald spot. Yet the circle remains stubbornly bare, dead center in the forest, like a mysterious portal or crop circle scorched into the earth. People who stand in the clearing often report overwhelming feelings of anxiety, dizziness, or nausea. Many hear disembodied voices. Others describe being touched by unseen hands, followed by scratches or bruises they can't explain. Some claim to have blacked out entirely, only to awaken outside the forest with no memory of how they got there. It's not uncommon for electronic phones, cameras, GPS to malfunction within the boundaries of this circle. And on Google Street View, even though you can't go directly into the forest, the overhead view of the clearing stands out like a scar. It's as if the land itself is trying to erase something or contain it. Hola Forest is filled with contorted trees, their trunks bending and spiraling unnaturally, like they've been twisted by invisible hands. Some form almost perfect spirals. Others arch into shapes eerily resembling human figures or gates. Botanists have studied the forest, and while natural phenomena like wind or disease are usually to blame for odd growth patterns, Hola's trees don't fit any known models. Visitors often report strange time anomalies. Watches stop, hours feel like minutes, or the reverse. One group of tourists claimed to have spent nearly 20 minutes in the forest, but when they exited, 4 hours had passed. Another man vanished for days after entering the forest alone. When he returned, disheveled and frightened, he claimed he'd only been gone a few hours and had no idea where he had been. The blurring of time is a reoccurring theme in Hola's lore. Some believe the forest exists at a thin spot between dimensions. Others say it's a place where the veil between the living and the dead is permanently torn. For years, locals refused to enter Hola's forest, especially at night. Those who did often returned shaken, their eyes wide with fear. Common accounts include apparitions floating through the trees, humanoid but distorted. Sometimes the spirits are silent, simply watching. Other times, they're more aggressive, whispering in indecipherable tongues, chasing intruders, or screaming in the distance when no one is around. Shadowy figures are frequently seen darting between the trunks, just out of reach. Paranormal investigators have recorded electronic voice phenomenon that sounds like screams, groans, or commands in languages no one recognizes. Dogs reportedly refuse to go near the forest, and those that are forced in often whimper and cower, their hair standing on end. Even skeptics have left Hola with stories they can't explain, and the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. Scientists have examined Hola's forest repeatedly. Some argue that the electromagnetic fields in the area are unusually strong, which could explain electronic failures, hallucinations, and feelings of dread. Others point to infrasound sound frequencies below human hearing as a possible cause of unease. These sounds can cause anxiety, headaches, and even nausea in humans, especially in enclosed spaces. But even with scientific attempts to rationalize it, no one has fully explained why this one stretch of woodland feels so overwhelmingly haunted. The perfect circle, the twisted trees, the reports of time loss, each piece adds to the puzzle, but none complete it. If you're brave enough, you can explore parts of Hola Forest on Google Maps. Though Street View doesn't go deep into the woods, you can see the entrance paths, the bizarre clearing from above, and the unnatural tree patterns that have baffled so many. But what's truly disturbing is that you can't see the cold that crawls up your spine, the eerie silence that falls even when the wind blows, and the sense that something ancient is watching just beyond the branches. Maps may show terrain, but they don't reveal fear. That you have to feel for yourself. As you drift off tonight, remember the strangest sights aren't always a nightmare. Sometimes they're just a zoom and a click away. I'm Mickey V. Sleep tight.